Thank you, Jessica. So you can go to the next slide. And welcome everybody to the National Council on Electricity Policy, or the NCEP member update. My name is Sarah Fitzpatrick. I work at NARUC as a technical and policy advisor, and as I serve as the staff lead to NCEP. The purpose of today's webinar is to provide each of our member organizations an opportunity to provide an update on the work that they're doing, the work that they will be working on in the future, resources they have available, and any priorities of their organization that they want to share. So if you'll go to the next slide. This webinar is being recorded. We will post the recording as well as the slides of today's presentation to NCEP's website, which is in the first bullet there next week. If you have a question during today's webinar, please put it in the Q&A box and we'll try and answer it with the time that we have left. Any unanswered questions we'll route to our speakers as a follow-up. And then if you have a question for a specific speaker, please just include their name or their organization in your question as you type it into the Q&A box. And then if you aren't already signed up for our listserv, you can sign up via the My NARUC link on the third bullet there. And please share that with anybody you think would be interested in the work that NCEP does. So next slide, please. Okay, so here's our agenda for today's webinar. I'm going to give a brief overview of NCEP and some of the resources events that we have coming up. And then I'll pass it over to each of our member organization representatives to share for a few minutes on what their organization is doing. Next slide, please. And then one more. So the National Council on Electricity Policy is a unique collaborative forum that's funded by the Department of Energy, and it brings together state decision makers on cross-cutting electricity issues. And I have our member organizations shown here, starting from the top and working clockwise. We have the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, or NARUC, the National Governors Association, or NGA, the National Association of Clean Air Agencies, or NACA, the National Conference of State Legislatures, or NCSL, the National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates, or NASUCA, and the National Association of State Energy Officials, or NASIO. And so these, under the NCEP umbrella, these state decision makers come together and talk about emerging electricity-related issues, such as how new technologies, changing policies, changing regulations, and markets impact their states and the electricity system as a whole, and how to deal with those changes. NCEP is also an opportunity for each of the members of these organizations to share knowledge, perspectives, and priorities across various electricity issues. So you can go to the next slide, please. NCEP is led by our executive committee. It's made up of representatives of each of the member organizations, which you can see listed here. We're led by our president, Commissioner of North Carolina, and our vice chairman of this executive committee helps provide leadership and input on the types of events that NCEP holds throughout the year and the direction that NCEP goes as an organization in general. They also serve to make sure that the priorities and focus of their organizations is represented in the work that NCEP does. So next slide, please. And then I'd like to share some information about upcoming events and resources. NCEP's focus for 2023 was on affordability. And so similarly, our annual meeting this year is focused on affordability in the electricity system transition. That'll be September 27th and 28th in Indianapolis, Indiana. There will be an add-on EV site visit and workshop preceding the annual meeting as well, so that's an extra bonus. You can use the QR code shown on the slide to register for the meeting, as well as the EV workshop and site visit. And then in a second, I'll drop a link to the registration page as well. And I would also advise everybody to please register soon, because our hotel block is closing on September 6th. You can also visit our website for more information on the meeting, including a draft agenda. And then one thing I wanted to share about the meeting is really one of the main goals is to be more collaborative for the meeting and to help participants think about new ways that they can address affordability in the work that they do in their respective states, as well as opportunities for cross-agency collaboration to accomplish that. So you can go to the next slide. Some of NCEP's resources, we have an archive building up for the benefit of our members and as well as anybody who's interested. One of the most important resources that we create is our mini guide series, which is a set of interview-based series that highlights successful examples of collaboration and engagement between different NCEP member groups. I have a list of our past mini guides shown here, and then we also have 2 in the works right now. One is on air and environmental regulator collaboration with public utility commissions and state energy offices, and the other is on higher education partnerships with state electricity decision makers for talent recruitment and retention. So you should look out for those to be published by the end of this year. In addition to our mini guides, we also have a transmission and distribution resource catalog, which has over 200 resources available on transmission and distribution coordination. So with that, Jessica, will you go to the next slide, and I'll pass it over to Dan Shea with NCSL.
Hey, thanks, Sarah. I really appreciate that, and want to thank NCEP for the work that they do and the opportunity to speak here, and particular shout out for those mini guides. We are definitely fans of those and appreciate the work that you do putting those together. So if we could go to the next slide. It's essentially a copy of the previous slide, but my name is Dan Shea. I'm a program principal at the National Conference of State Legislatures in our energy program, and I'm happy to be here with you today talking about some of the work we've been doing. Next slide, please. For anyone who isn't familiar with NCSL, we are a bipartisan, member-driven organization representing the legislatures, state legislatures across the U.S., including territories and all commonwealths. We serve all 7,000 plus state legislators and more than 30,000 legislative staff across the country. Our energy program, along with many of our other programs covering the full gamut of policy issues that state legislators face, we work to support legislators and legislative staff through a variety of engagements and resources. These include individualized research and analysis on energy issues for state legislators and staff, technical assistance and testimony, and the development of reports and white papers on priority issues. And then we also convene our members to engage in on these issues at in-person and virtual meetings. We'll get into some of that here soon. Most of our staff, like me, are located in Denver. We do have a smaller office in DC where we advocate on behalf of states' rights on the Hill and engage with our federal partners. I will note that NCSL as an organization does not engage in any direct advocacy at the state level. We do not endorse any particular policy or legislation. Next slide, please. So one of the big things that we do is bringing people together, policymakers, and we host a number of events and meetings each year. Indianapolis sounds like it's going to be a very popular place to be this year, NCEP's upcoming meeting being one of those. Our big meeting is our legislative summit, which took place in Indianapolis this year from August 14th through 16th. We had a little over 5,000 total registrants for our summit this year. The summit, like NCSL, covers all policy topics under the sun, but we did have 2 very well attended sessions on energy issues as part of the main summit. One was focused on electric grid reliability and resilience during the clean energy transition, essentially looking at how the shift from firm baseload resources toward more variable resources like wind and solar are affecting utility and grid planning and operations. The other focused on permitting for energy infrastructure, with a particular emphasis on electric transmission infrastructure. We also hosted a number of meetings of several longstanding groups. Our Nuclear Legislative Working Group met in Idaho Falls in June, and we toured the Idaho National Lab and had several educational sessions on relevant topics to nuclear energy and state policy. The Energy Supply Task Force met after the summit in Indianapolis with tours of Mid-Continent Independent System Operator and, again, educational sessions. This group is focused more broadly on sort of any energy topic under the sun. And then our Legislative Energy Horizons Institute. That's a unique format. It brings together a sort of annual cohort of state and local policymakers for 2 sessions that provide participants with over 60 hours of university accredited energy education, ranging on essential electricity 101 and infrastructure to energy policy. And those meetings, that was Richland in July, Richland, Washington, and then they'll meet again in October in Washington, D.C. We also have been standing up a few newer groups. Our Energy Staff Network is a brand new group that we pulled together this year, meant to educate legislative staff and expand that network. It allows staff to learn and discuss a variety of energy and policy topics and to build relationships across the state. Next slide, please. Our energy team also does quite a bit of research and writing. We've had a number of publications come out so far this year and several more that we're working on. In addition to our annual review of major energy trends in state legislation that we published earlier, we also published a report on the role of nuclear power in the clean energy transition, a primer on performance-based regulation to really provide foundational information for state legislators and explore some case studies on how states have approached the topic. We also had an energy security publication on human-driven physical threats to energy infrastructure. This driven primarily by some of the recent rifle attacks on utility substations. And we also completed a legislative review on energy security, resilience, and cybersecurity trends. We are working at this point on several publications, among them one on that's going to explore transmission, electric transmission, and the state role, and then another on integrated distribution system planning. We also maintain and update regularly several resources that are pretty popular. Among them are State Renewable Portfolio and Standards and Goals webpage, another on EV and alternative fuel vehicle policies, and then more on emissions reduction policies. And then our legislative database is a public-facing database on energy issues, on energy legislation. You can explore that, and it's a really great public-facing resource on that you can look back into the archives or focus on this session. Finally, we did host several webinars, one on energy storage as resilience. We provided a review of opportunities for states under the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and then considered the role of distribution system planning as the grid modernizes. And all of those are now housed on a new webpage called our Video Resource Center. Next slide, please. Coming up, we do have several events coming down the line. Our base camp is something born out of the pandemic when we transitioned our summit to a virtual format, and we've just kept it going. So like Summit, Base Camp offers a really broad format on a variety of different sessions and different policy areas for legislators and legislative staff, but through a virtual setting, so much easier to access, no need to travel. That meeting will be held November 8th through 9th this year. Next slide. Our forecast is another annual meeting. It's held in the December timeframe prior to legislative sessions, and the idea being to provide sessions on pressing policy issues and legislative specific training. That meeting will be in Austin, Texas this year from December 4th through 6th. As part of that, we will be convening another one of our newer groups, the Energy Security Working Group. This group will meet for the first time on December 7th. That group is going to focus on energy security issues that fall generally under the umbrella of DOE's Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response. That group, the aim is to expand legislator understanding on a lot of these issues and provide a dedicated forum for them to learn about these threats and how they as legislators and their colleagues can work to improve energy security in their states. Next slide, please. Just real quick to highlight newsletters and some ongoing resources that help. If you're interested, please do sign up. You can sign up on our website it's pretty easy to find that webpage. I don't know if anybody can click that link right now, but we have two primary energy related newsletters. Plugged In is, again, full range of energy issues published monthly. We do highlight all of our new resources in that newsletter, in addition to other ways of promoting them. but also highlight major trends or legislation that's been enacted in states. The News Reactor is focused specifically on nuclear energy issues primarily and is published quarterly. Next slide, please. Finally, we do produce several podcasts, and the energy team has helped to develop a number of those on relevant topics. Our American States is sort of the main flagship podcast, but we have several more now. Recent topics we've explored involve energy security and resilience and how federal policy will impact state energy priorities. We're currently working on one that we hope, I think the term is will drop or will be published and released in late September. It's on cybersecurity for the energy sector. And we've also worked on a few other formats, but not in the past 6 months, including Facebook town halls and producing short videos on various energy topics. And next slide. And with that, that's really my presentation. That's sort of where NCSL has been working recently, and happy to answer any questions that may have come up. Thanks, Sarah.
All right, I think it's on me to go next. Sarah, I'm going to just go ahead and jump on in. My name is Miles Keogh. As you can see, I get the corner office here at the beautiful National Association of Clean Air Agencies, or NACA. NACA convenes, like these other N groups do, agencies. We have 157 agencies that implement the Clean Air Act, and those include state agencies, but they also include city and county agencies. The Clean Air Act obviously concerns, air quality and climate change, and electricity is one important part of that. But NACA's policy and technical assistance reach has to cover a lot of other kind of major and minor stationary sources, area sources, industry, agriculture, vehicles, ocean-going vessels, airplanes, EIEIO, all the stuff. So I'm going to try and focus the stuff that I'm talking about today on policy areas that NACA has been working on that relate to electricity. For the most part, we're a policy-making organization that convenes these organizations to provide technical assistance for their own implementation of the Clean Air Act. So we don't write as many papers or run as many trainings, but those that we do that I'll talk about today, you can be in contact with me, and I'd be happy to share all those. I'll talk a little bit about some of the briefs that we've done, some of the working groups that we've got going, the trainings that we've done, and then finally some of the policy work that I think is germane to the interest of folks in the electricity policy space, and as much as air quality and climate overlap with those pretty significantly. So that's what I'm going to talk about, and I'll keep it a nice tight 5, as they say. For briefs, we produce a decent amount of briefs to just kind of like shortcut the learning for our clean air agencies. That we've done a bunch on the Inflation Reduction Act and a number of other kinds of technical air quality and climate issues, things like monitors and sensors and federal equivalency methods and the like. We also keep track of where all the court cases that relate to the Clean Air Act are in the courts, and write briefs about what they mean for our members. We don't tend to get involved in the courts ourselves, although sometimes we do. But our court briefs and our court tracker cover everything from the West Virginia versus EPA case to the Held versus Montana case, which is that recently decided kids climate case. Our working groups, we got 3 that are probably germane to the interest of this group. One that's probably our most active one right now is our Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Working Group. As y'all, I'm sure know, the IRA included about $5 billion in planning and implementation grants that go out to states. And we work some with NASIO. We also do a bunch of joint efforts with N groups that live over in the local government space, the National League of Cities and the National Conference of Mayors, Climate Mayors, Sustainability Directors Network, and a bunch of other local folks as well, because the local agencies have seen are seeing a pretty big share of that CPRG money. We also work with those other local groups on our IRA working group, which covers a bunch of the other IRA provisions that deal with ports and transportation and solar for all and green banks, environmental justice block grants, and all kinds of other things, and just trying to keep track of all the moving parts and the money there. And then finally, we do continue to partner pretty closely with NASIO on our VW work group. The VW settlement that happened years and years ago is still humming along, pushing out money to do things like clean up school buses and put out clean vehicle infrastructure. Our trainings are an area that do kind of parlay pretty quickly into the electricity space, and that overlap with some of the work that these other end groups engage on. Our training committee recently ran trainings on green hydrogen, which is going to be a pretty big part of the EPA's proposal for power plants. We did that with the Department of Energy and the Department of Treasury. We did a training on what's a PUC with NARUC. We had Jennifer Murphy from the NARUC staff come enlighten us. She's a delight. We've done workforce stuff with some of the end groups. And most recently, we've done a lot of work on sensors, satellites, and digitization. A lot of the smart grid revolution that came through about 10 years ago through the electricity sector is starting to hit the air quality sector as lower and lower cost sensors and satellite data. This explosion of digital information really changes how we see what air pollution looks like. And just in time, as wildfire smoke comes roaring on through all our neighborhoods, creating a real demand for that system visualization. Upcoming, we've also got a bunch of stuff on permitting reform. That includes things like NSR, but it also includes things like what transmission permitting reform, NEPA permitting reform, and other kinds of prospects exist up on Capitol Hill. Sarah was nice enough to drop in the chat a link to NACA's policy page. And again, this is probably where NACA does most of its bread and butter work. We've done a ton of policy work just in the last year because in particular, the EPA has really been kicking it up with regards to putting out proposed rulemakings and final rulemakings across a whole suite of things. We've been filing comments on the reconsideration for the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS, for ozone and particulates. We did extensive interaction with industry, with advocates, with enviros, with consumer groups, and with EPA on the power plant rule, and we're able to file consensus comments on the power plant proposal that EPA has for GHGs. We also filed comments on the 111 implementing regulations, the disapproval of several SIPs, regional haze. We filed comments on the new MATS proposal, on the good neighbor rule, on several vehicle rules around heavy duty, light duty, and medium duty GHG regulations. And those comments are available on NACA's website. I also just want to make myself available to folks from your constituencies. I'm committed to the National Council. I worked for NARUC and I worked on the National Council myself in my previous jobs before this one. And wherever NACA can be a resource to help explain like the intersection between clean air, climate, and electricity, the kinds of work that you do in legislatures and governors' offices, public utility commissions, energy offices, consumer advocacy groups. I'm very, very eager to come work with y'all, understand what your interests and needs are, and help explain where things are in clean air world as well. Thanks for the time today. I'm going to turn things back over to the NCEP staff to do the next thing. Thank you.
All right. Excuse me. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're able to see and hear me all right. I'm excited to be back on the line with you all today. I know it's been a couple of months since we've had one of these calls, but I always find them valuable, and you'll probably hear some similarities in my presentation to what you just heard from Dan and from Miles, which means that we're we're hitting on some of the same topics. We must be working on some of the right topics. And frankly, Miles and Dan, I already have a couple of notes on things to follow up with you on. But that aside, I wanted to thank NARUC and the team over there for hosting this webinar and for having me on it. If we can go to the next slide. And one after that. For those of you who aren't familiar with NGA and our Center for Best Practices, NGA is the bipartisan organization for the nation's 55 state and territory governors. I work in our Center for Best Practices as our energy program director. And the center is NGA's state policy shop. So we don't take any positions on state level policy, but we're really here as an extension of the governor's offices to support them on a wide range of topics. Like I said, I work on energy, but being NGA, I have colleagues who work on the breadth of policy areas that governors may need to deal with, everything from children and families to public health, homeland security, education, workforce development, and more, which has given us some interesting opportunities over the last several years to really explore intersections across the organization. You'll hear in just a minute about some work that we've done on healthcare resilience and energy resilience for healthcare facilities, working closely with colleagues on our healthcare delivery team, also some work supporting the workforce for cybersecurity workforce for the energy sector, bringing a couple of these teams together. Going over to the next slide. So I lead our energy program and what's called our Energy Policy Learning Network. So this is a network of governors' energy policy advisors from across the states. The majority of whom sit directly in the governor's office. Some are dual-hatted as state energy officials, and we convene them through a wide number of venues, both in person and virtual, and across multiple topics that I'll get into over the next several minutes. In addition, we're also always available for just on-demand, quick turnaround technical assistance requests for governors or for other senior state staff. So if any of you ever have those sticky questions that come across your desks and are looking for assistance, we're here as a resource. So going on to the next slide. I'm going to first start off by talking about some of our recent resources, in particular those that we've published since the last time we all met, which was, I believe, back in February. And after that, I'll run briefly through some of our 2023 and 2024 priorities and upcoming projects. Just in the interest of collaboration, I did also want to flag the image here. This is from an event that we hosted in partnership with NARUC back in March out in Kansas City. It was an energy emergency preparedness and response training. So that's something that I think was timely given some of the challenges that our neighbors down south and out to the west are facing this week. And it's work that we plan to continue. Going to the next slide. So as governors are continuing to focus on applying for and making use of federal dollars through the IIJA, IRA, and other federal programs, we've heard from them about the need to really leverage those federal dollars and identify other funding sources that can stretch them further. And so there's been a lot of interest of late in green banks and infrastructure banks. So we released this paper earlier in the year, really providing an overview of state green and infrastructure banks and exploring how governors can establish those in their states. The next resource that I want to talk about, going on to the next slide, is one that I teased earlier. We worked closely with our healthcare delivery team earlier in the year to research and talk with our members about the needs for energy resilience and energy investment in healthcare facilities. So these are not just large hospitals with diesel generators, although the paper is inclusive of those, but it also includes smaller healthcare facilities, dialysis centers, facilities that support the elderly, and others that are absolutely crucial during an emergency, but may not have a backup power requirement, and therefore may be in real trouble should there be a hurricane or another major incident. So we really explored what those needs are from the perspectives of the sector and the states, and some of the actions that governors can take working with their partners across the states and in the private sector to support energy resilience for those facilities. We'll go into the next slide. Emerging technologies like hydrogen continue to be priorities, in particular with federal programs like regional hydrogen hubs. So we've been developing programming and resources just to provide background primers on some of these emerging technologies to help our members better navigate grant applications and planning processes. This is one that a colleague of mine pulled together that I thought really came out well. It's a nice primer on hydrogen as an energy resource, exploring how it can be used, how states can leverage it, and what role they would play. The last resource I want to flag before I talk about some upcoming work is one that I think I bring up on all of these calls, but it always seems to be relevant. So going to the next slide. It's our roadmap on executive authorities during energy emergencies. And I bring that up here, recognizing that we have an active hurricane and recent wildfires, among other incidents. So my hope is that this is something that you all are able to access and that it continues to be useful as you plan for or navigate emergency response in your states. So advancing 2 slides ahead, I want to touch on just a couple of priority areas and some upcoming resources that we're going to be releasing. The first is, I think, the one that's most timely for us, related to Grid X7, which is the largest energy security exercise in North America. We've released a request for applications to convene a cohort of 4 state teams to participate in this next iteration of GridX. GridX takes place every other year, and we've done this work for the last several iterations of the exercise. It's an exercise that's run by the Electricity ISAC and NERC, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, and it really is designed to, through distributed play, to explore the breakdown of the grid through a joint cyber and physical attack. So states are all welcome and encouraged to participate, whether or not you go through NGA's cohort. I want to be very clear about that. You do not have to participate through us, but if you would like to apply, or if you're interested in seeing that request for applications, I can send it your way. We'll be providing added technical assistance and support in advance of the exercise and during the exercise. And then we're going to be convening participating states afterwards for a state-focused after-action workshop and action planning process to really synthesize experiences and learnings from the exercise and identify things that you can bring back to your agencies in your states to improve energy emergency planning. The next slide, I also want to highlight our work on transmission. So planning, siting, and permitting. Utah Governor Spencer Cox and Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards co-chaired a 9-governor working group this year focused on accelerating major energy and infrastructure projects, including transmission. This resulted in a recently released bipartisan vision from the states and from the governors to accelerate project delivery, focusing on things like improving the NEPA process, prioritizing state and territory permitting efforts, and preserving environmental safeguards and community engagement. So I'd encourage you to visit that. I think it'll be a live link once you get a digital copy of these slides. We've also then expanded that into a very robust energy and infrastructure permitting resources page that's really geared toward the things that you all as state officials will need to navigate this topic. And we're planning some continued work and tentatively a transmission focused convening next year to continue supporting the governors and the states. So the last slide I want to touch on is just a summation of some of our ongoing and upcoming resources, including written products, two that are imminently coming out. One are focused on grid modernization, one looking at grid enhancing and advanced grid technologies, another looking at innovations in state regulation and how those can intersect with gubernatorial policy. We have work around nuclear energy, energy crisis communications that we're doing with NASIO, exploring cybersecurity talent pipeline for the energy sector and how states can drive work or help support development of robust workforces and more. We also have upcoming convenings with some of our partners on the line around energy equity. We're working with NCSL on that Legislative Energy Horizons Institute, and are looking at a handful of other projects as well. But I think I've thoroughly used up my allotted time, so I am going to leave it there with my contact information on the next slide. I encourage you to get in touch with me if you have any questions or if you want to learn more about anything that I just talked about. And otherwise, I really appreciate you all taking the time, and I will turn it over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Can you, I don't know if you can see or hear me.
We can hear you and we can see you.
And okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to participate. My name is Catherine Reed, and I am the Senior Program Director at NASIO with your electricity program. Really pleased to be here with my colleagues and compatriots from our fellow organizations. The one thing that's so clear to me in hearing the updates is just that there is so much similar work being done, and I think we're coordinating quite nicely. And you'll see that we'll probably be, a lot of us be referencing a lot of the same activities because we are coordinating so closely on a lot of these initiatives. So next slide, please. For those of you who are not familiar with NASIO, we are a national nonprofit organization that represents all of the state energy officials in all 56 states and territories around the United States. We serve as a resource for and about state energy offices, and we do that through a variety of means, through topical committees on a wide breadth of energy topics. We host regional dialogues and on these types of topics, and provide opportunities for peer sharing, for best practice exchange on emerging energy issues. We also advance the interests of the states and territory energy offices before Congress and the administration. So next slide, please. And as similar to a lot of the other organizations you've heard from, you know, our focus is broad because energy is so broad and it touches so many different parts of our society. So here you can see all the various sort of work streams that we have going within the larger organization of NASIO. So we range from buildings to electricity to workforce, resilience, equity, transportation, solar, so you name it, we are engaged in it. So next slide, please. I'm here to focus a little bit on the electricity program. So here you see some larger buckets of program areas that we focus on in the electricity program, recognizing, of course, it's hard to put things in buckets because everything is so interconnected these days. But the idea is that through the electricity program at NASIO, we do try to provide our members with the resources and with the opportunity for connection with peers, with research, with tools, opportunities to learn, and to help them do the work that they need to do in the state at the state level. So you can see here we have a lot of focus on resilience. Certainly through the Infrastructure Act this year, there's been a lot of focus on grid resilience, and we are supporting, among many other things, of the 40101D implementation, in addition to a variety of other grid resilience work. We also work on just this broader category of cleaner electricity sector. So what does that look like? New technologies, hydrogen, offshore wind, energy storage. We look at also the push that I think everyone is feeling, which is the push toward electrification and the implications to the grid. So what does that mean? There needs to be more of a focus on distribution planning and transmission planning at the state level. So what does that look like? Also to provide education on various electricity market structures and rate design. We also do focus on the issues of equity and economic development, and equity really kind of permeates everything that we do, and certainly with the most recent, certainly with the passage of the Infrastructure Act and an IRA, there's even a greater attention to issues of equity. So, but we also do provide a lot of peer sharing. We do have provide opportunities for learning about ways to expand stakeholder engagement in a meaningful way that reaches the low and moderate income communities, as well as sort of identifying a state's workforce needs. And then finally, NASIO, as a national nonprofit, is able to serve as a liaison between the states and the federal government at a variety of levels, certainly fundamentally through the Department of Energy, but also through a lot of federal agencies as well. So we do play that role. Next slide, please. Just in terms of updates since the last time we spoke, I do want to basically say this is a highlight reel. This is not everything. As you can imagine, with all that's going on in the energy world, it's just I think everybody's pretty maxed out and pretty engaged in so many things. So this is just a highlight. I do want to say that over the within the past 6 months, actually, in May and June, we held our regional meetings. We do this every year. We had 6 regional meetings based on the way NASIO sort of divides up the country. And this is just an opportunity for us to engage with our members on a regional basis, to get direct feedback. It helps to inform our priorities, to hear from the states directly, and to help facilitate sort of regional discussions on the entire spectrum of energy topics. So electricity did factor largely in these discussions this year. We had a lot of sessions focused on grid resilience and transmission planning, offshore wind, that type of thing. I'll also flag something that Dan just mentioned, which was we have this collaboration. As you can see, many of these members, my colleagues here are mentioned. We have been working collectively with NARUC, with NGA, and with NSUCA on hosting these equity roundtables. And so this is basically the opportunity to bring together all these entities, members from all these groups, to explore programmatic, policy, and regulatory approaches to incorporating equity into all that we do. The one in the Midwest that was held in early June focused on integrating equity considerations into distribution system planning, as well as energy efficiency programs. We're having our next one coming up. I'll talk about that briefly. That will be focused in the Western region. You can see also another collaboration that with our friends at NARUC, and I'm sorry, Jeff, I'm stealing your thunder. We're having our we collectively launched the Advanced Nuclear States Collaborative. This was basically an initiative to explore ways to incorporate advanced nuclear reactors into and technologies into programs and policies at the state. We've had 15 states participate so far. It's been a very engaging and sort of excited group, and we're really looking forward to continue to work with NARUC on this initiative. There was a kickoff back in April, back in Richland, Washington, and a tour of PNNL facilities. Also, in terms of sort of new technologies, the NASIO Carbon Management and Coal Conversion Workshop and Site Visit was held. This is basically an opportunity that was provided back earlier this month for peer sharing and information exchange on issues of coal conversion and utilization, on carbon storage and direct air capture. And this was done also in collaboration with a visit to the National Energy Technology Lab in Pittsburgh. We also had kicked off the Rural Energy Working Group. As I mentioned at the outset, NASIO has a variety of committees that we convene on particular topics. And it was decided this year that this was a topic that needed to have its own group. The focus on rural issues, basically, this was an attempt to focus the attention on key issues that impact energy use on rural lands and agricultural operations, with key focus areas being exploration of renewable energy options in those applications, efficient energy and water use in agricultural operations, and looking at geographic equity with regard to energy efficiency. So we're really excited that it's kicked off several months ago, and there's been some active discussions among our members, and I think it's sort of scratching an itch that was there, and I think we'll have a lot more opportunities to explore possibilities moving forward. And then finally, I'll mention again the grid resilience work. We affectionately call it the 40101D work, but it's actually broader than just that part of the IIJA. But this is all the grid resilience work. We have a big focus over the last several months was to continue to support our members who were recipients of the formula grants. Our members and beyond, actually, the state members or the state representatives who were recipients of the formula grants. So this was in assistance with providing resources to assist with applications, and now that the grants are being provided, the funding is being provided from DOE. Now it's just a matter of continuing that coordination with the grid deployment office, with our fellow N groups, trying to make sure that everyone has the information they need, especially as they begin to pivot from the application of those funds, the receipt of those funds, and then to the implementation of the grid resilience work. I'll also point out that in the last 6 months, two of the publications I'd like to highlight that focus on electricity specifically were also joint initiatives with NASIO and NARUC. We have 2 on microgrids, a microgrid framework, and a clean energy microgrids document. So I encourage you all to check that out on our website. Next slide, please. And then looking forward at the next sort of the near term, we have a variety of events that I've listed here at the left. You can see we work also with NARUC on a grid interactive grid interactive buildings working group forum, and there will be another webinar coming up in September. We also have our Western Regional Roundtable on Equity. So this is also something that Dan had mentioned, but this is the second one. We did the first one back in the Midwest. Now we're focusing on the Western region. We hope to move around the states and provide each region with an opportunity. So we're holding this in September in Denver, Colorado. And again, this is to explore distribution system planning as well as integration of distributed energy resources through an equity lens. And these will be in person, like a day and a half. The next activity I'd like to flag is also an in-person workshop. This will be pretty exciting. This will be a day and a half in Bethesda, Maryland, and it will be in early October. And the focus will really be to explore the opportunities and barriers for microgrids, and it'll include a site visit of a microgrid deployed at the Brookville Energy Smart Energy Depot, I believe. I think I have that name right. So that will be very exciting, and we're really pleased to continue to work with our partners at NARUC on that. We also have our national our annual meeting for NASIO that's going to be held in Portland, Oregon. Just last week, we've put out a preliminary agenda, so you can keep an eye on that. And it always covers the broad spectrum of all energy issues that we're engaged in. And then finally, this is another collaborative effort with a variety of entities. I probably have left some entities off, but we are working collectively to develop a 2-day training session on distribution planning and resilience. And it will be 2 days. We'll have 3 sessions that will all be the same. So we'll have 3 opportunities for folks to participate. The first one will be held in December. We don't have the date set yet, and we will certainly share that out. But the idea is to have a full day committed to providing states from all of our memberships, basically, with more information on the importance of engaging in distribution system planning and how that looks and how to go about it, plus a hands-on also resilience training, looking at energy resilience and what's required for that. And then finally, I'll just mention we have 3 publications that are in their final phases of being refined, and you'll see you'll see that we're often in a lot of the same tracks as a lot of our fellow organizations, focusing on transmission. We have 2 transmission papers coming out, as well as distribution planning, looking at how energy offices can engage in that. I do want to say this, that over the past whenever the Infrastructure Act was passed, state energy offices, now there's an actual requirement that they become engaged in distribution and transmission planning. That has been a fairly new thing. Some states have already been involved in this for a long time, but a lot of energy offices have not. So we're hoping to provide more training, more opportunities for our members to engage in these matters. And I do want to point at the bottom, I do have our website events page, so you can always look at that and see what is on the horizon. So next slide, please. Oh, I just do want to say one more thing. The closing. This is our small but mighty team, and I think since I'm probably a new face for many of you, Kirsten Verklaas is on maternity leave very happily. She'll be back in early October, I believe. And I joined NASIO back in December of last year, and I'm really pleased. And I'm joined by my colleagues here, Kelsey Jones and Marianne Gold. So please reach out to us if you have any questions about anything I've talked about. It's been a pleasure to be a part of this today. Thank you.
All right, everyone, I'll take it from here. My name is David Springy. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates, NCEP. Very pleased to be here and very pleased to be part of the NCEP team. I'm going to go super fast because NARUC is batting cleanup and they have a lot more to present than I do. But the consumer advocates, we are the state statutory consumer advocates to the notion that NARUC is the state statutory regulator. 45 states have other consumer advocates statutorily created to represent consumers. We've been around for 40 years. We're offices of attorney general, independent government agencies, and then we have affiliate and associate members that are also nonprofits or recognized. So next slide. Just a pretty picture of sort of where we're at. You can see the states that we need to get to. We've got 5 states that don't have a consumer advocate, but we've got most of the country covered, whether by statutory or nonprofits. Next. I just wanted to hit a couple of pieces of information. Again, NCEP is the smallest of the N groups. We don't have the bandwidth or personnel to produce the type of studies or do the type of work that the other N groups do, but we are very big consumers of the work of all the other N groups, and we do appreciate our opportunities to work with NARUC and NASIO and the different groups as we do some of the different types of research or regulatory dialogue. So, but we do have a few things on our website that are of interest. I did want to highlight about halfway down the page. One of the things that we've been trying to do at NCEP for our membership, given some of the workforce issues that we're having, is create sort of a regulatory basics courses. These are webinars that you can come and watch and learn how to do a revenue requirement, what is how to do a cost of equity analysis, how to do class cost of service analysis, how to do rate design. These are something that if you have someone that is just walking in the door and really has no idea about the regulatory process, rate cases, those types of things, it is a resource that you can send your people to, and they're just free. They're not meant to replace the NARUC rate schools that are out there, but it at least is a starting point. So maybe everybody hop up. There's some nice links. Check out some of the stuff on the NCEP webinar. Next slide. So a lot of our training revolves around some work that the Department of Energy and Lawrence Berkeley National Lab do, some of the grid training sessions. And I know they do this with some of the other N groups too, but we just finished 2 sessions at our mid-year meeting on distributional equity analysis and then time-sensitive demand value analysis around energy efficiency. These are ways for our membership to sort of get an idea of some of the new technologies and address some of the more challenging issues and provide training. There's a link at the bottom of the page. It'll be on the next page too. But we now have a library of about 22 DOE grid training webinars around these issues. And then another, I think, 16 slide presentations that were not captured as a webinar, but were presented live at one of our meetings. Next. And in that same sense, we're just getting ready to start a fall webinar series next week around issues of electric vehicles, bill impacts as we move towards dynamic pricings or time of use pricing, and then some work around grid resilience. So those will get posted on our website once we finish those. So those are coming up for our membership, but again, we'll be able to share those. Next. And then just a quick mention, we do 2 conferences annually. Just generally speaking, wherever NARUC is at in November, NCEP is usually there. So if you attend the NARUC conferences in November, NCEP is there. This year's kind of a one-off. We're not going to be with November or NARUC. This November, we'll be having our own conference this November, and that'll be in Charlotte, North Carolina. And then we'll do a mid-year meeting somewhere next year also. But we always invite everybody else to attend our conferences and have some interaction with the consumer advocates and get an idea of some of the consumer concerns as we talk about all of the policy and the things that are going on in the country around energy right now. The consumer voice is always very important to have at the table, so we invite you to attend. Next. And then just some contact information. You can reach me. We do a little bit more than I hit, but again, I wanted to run through this pretty quickly and turn it over to NARUC because they have a little bit more to go. So happy to be here and thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, David. And before Jeff pops in, just for our participants, we're going to record all of Jeff's presentation. So if you have to hop at the top of the hour, you can look at the recording later. Go ahead, Jeff.
Yep. I won't be offended if I start to see the numbers drop. Go ahead, move on to the next slide and the next one. I think it's pretty clear, right? We all the N groups here, we serve our particular constituencies, and we have a lot of similarity in the way we do that, both by providing resources to the groups and also then representing the interests of that group. Next. I work at the Center for Partnerships Innovation, as do my colleagues Sarah and Jessica. We're really the technical assistance group within NARUC. We do a lot of the same kinds of things that the other organizations do. We do webinars, we produce papers, we hold trainings, we have our conferences. Most of our funding, though, within CPI comes from DOE offices, particularly the Office of Electricity. And so a lot of our work focuses on electricity and hence our involvement with NCEP. The image on the right is our 2-page CPI fact sheet that we keep up to date. So for the latest information, please go to our website. The link to the website is in the footer there. It's pretty straightforward. You can always find information about what we're up to there. Moving on. Right, a lot of the same topics that have been addressed today. Integrated distribution system planning, grid resilience, hydrogen transmission siting and planning, equity, environmental justice, cybersecurity. We're really covering the spectrum of issues that our members are dealing with as they regulate electric utilities, gas utilities, and to some extent water and telecom utilities. But electricity is obviously a huge part of what we do. I want to just quickly note the asterisks on this page, which represent the fact that we have a peer working group or partnership. That's one of the ways that we like to serve our members, is to provide the opportunity for peer-to-peer learning and for our members to direct the work and to work towards work products and resources that will serve all of their peers throughout the organization. So if one of those strikes your fancy, please get in touch and we'll get you signed up. Moving on, some pretty pictures of our recent publications. As Catherine mentioned, our newest release is on the microgrids framework, and we're very excited about that. And we will be presenting that at a webinar. And our next slide here shows results, not results, but some of our more recent webinars and some of the topics. You can see the breadth of things that we cover. We have one from it coming up Friday to talk about this newly released microgrids framework. So I hope you'll look for information on that on our website or NASIO's website. Let's see, jumping ahead, the next slide talks about briefly our in-person events that are coming up in our calendar. Apologies for the small text here, but we do conferences like so many of the other N groups on here today. Our annual, as David indicated, is coming up in November. If you're interested, please look for information about that on our website. We do regional work as well to help support our members, make it easier for them to get to things like training. You can see in purple, we're having a series of equity workshops in various regions. I think everybody today has mentioned the importance of that as we work to evolve the electricity system and our energy system. If you go to the next slide, you will see contact information for myself and for all of my peers. I understand this will be available, these slides will be available so you can get a little bit more detail about what we've been up to and what we're working on. And also, again, the fact sheet on our website will give you a great concise summary of everything that's coming up on all the various topics that we're working on to support our members. I'll kick it back over to you, Sarah.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jeff. We have no time for Q&A, but I just want to say thank you to all of our N group representatives who came to share information about their organizations today. And a big thank you to our participants. The slides and the recording will be posted to NCEP's website, which you can see on the slide here. But thanks everybody for being here, and please take care.